This is one of those days where, you want to take the day off. And fortunately, I got all my errands run for the holiday, and there's just too much going on. And we're going to look to the north here in this particular segment. And I had a guest on this past week on our podcast, and Matthew McOrder. And Matthew just said, "Hey, we're looking at a lot of religious persecution around the world, and Dave, it's coming here." Well, the coming here just landed just north of here. No, I don't mean Santa in the North Pole. I'm talking about Canada. This is very serious, and I'm telling you, it's creeping in. But we also see subtle signs of it here, and I'll get into that here after I tell you that we are brought to you by Noble Gold. Now, listen, you want 10 1 ounce silver coins? Beautiful arrangement. Beautiful. Qualified investors. If you convert your worthless or soon to be worthless IRA and 401k that the bank can seize under Dodd-Frank 2010, and the banks increasingly are in trouble, and that's what will lead them to do this. Well, you can convert that to where you own it. It's backed by gold and or silver, and there you go. It's yours forever, and no one can touch it. Sounds like a pretty good idea, doesn't it? That's just one of the services Noble Gold offers. I've been a customer for over 9 years, or excuse me, 9 years? It's over 8 years for me as a customer, 9 years as an advertiser. And I have to tell you, they're the best organization to ever deal with, ever, ever. They never pressure you. You literally have to close your own deal. I was shocked the first time I went through it. I thought, okay, I'm ready. What would you like to do next, Mr. Hodges? Well, I'd like to close the deal. Oh, okay. We'll be happy to help you with that. That's how it's going to go for you. They will never, ever push you, but I'm pushing you. I'm telling you right now, you need to do this, and you'll get that bonus of 10 1 ounce silver coins. By the way, they were worth $62 an ounce at the beginning of this advertising cycle for this month. They're now worth about $75 an ounce. Pretty nice gift. What do? Call 877-646-5347, 877-646-5347. Or if you forget the number, just go to davehodgesgold.com, get started there, and get the process rolling. All right. I want to mention a couple things that Matthew and I talked about with regard to America. Um, when Benjamin Netanyahu brings over 1,040 pastors from American megachurches to become ambassadors for Israel, I'm fine as long as there's limits. And here's my limits. My limits are defense of Israel, not foreign wars of imperialism. And I'm going to make that very clear. No American boots on the ground. Second item, Judaism is the first half of my Bible. It's foundational for the Christian religion. That's where the commonality stops. There is no compromise in my worldview with regard to the New Testament regarding the crucifixion, the resurrection, the second coming, and everything in between. There is no compromise. I won't accept any compromise from another religion at all. And I'm America first. And when I look at the money that we're throwing at Netanyahu and the fact that their people get free healthcare, free college, and right now we are struggling, what is it, 90% of our families are going month to month. I'm sorry, we can't not keep the gravy train going. It's America first. And yes, I believe in preferential treatment for Israel because they're an ally. Even when I disagree with their present administration, I can't wait for a change to take place. And neither can a lot of Israelis from what they tell me. So I want to make sure I drew the line there. But we are seeing potential religious interference. We're already seeing it in TPUSA. They have bastardized their mission. This is not Charlie's organization. And stop campaigning on the grief. Stop monetizing the grief on Charlie because you are not using your money, your resources, and your attitude at TPUSA any longer to further what Charlie was about. And yes, we'll talk about this later. Charlie was in fear of his life. That's coming out loud and clear from people who are speaking up, contacting me, past and present members of TPUSA that are very distraught by what's happening. We are seeing religious interference in this country, and it's only going to grow worse because this is growing internationally like a stage 4 cancer. Matthew McWhorter was exactly right on the money with what he said. And if you haven't heard that interview, you should go back and listen to it. We aired it on social media in the past week, and it aired on our radio networks as well as our podcast service. Um, Very, very, very informed individual. Okay, now having said that we are open and vulnerable to religious persecution or misuse of the Christian religion to mold politics and finance, and I mean it not in a healthy way, but in a manipulative way. Well, it's happening in Canada, and it's happening right now. This is Michelle Rumpel Garner, and she is a podcaster. She is an activist, and I think she's a pretty darn good one. And I'll tell you, she opposes a lot of things in America, but she's a Canadian. And when American and Canadian interests collide, she has a duty to speak up. I respect that. I don't demean her for that, but I think she needs to realize that what's going on in Ottawa is wrong. It's abusive. What's going on in Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and half of British Columbia is correct. They want out. They want to join America for a lot of reasons, and I think they just got a really big reason right here. Let's take a listen to what Michelle has to say.
Let me break this down for you. So the Liberals introduced a bill a few months ago. It's called Bill C9. It is another censorship bill. It's a thought crime bill. Conservatives have been actively opposing it. But what it does is it hands the government powerful new tools to decide what the courts will consider as hate speech. So we all know that when the Liberals try to define something as hate speech, it is, the purpose of it is to stop communication of different ideas. And I'm going to get into how existing hate speech laws are not enforced by the Liberal government, but let me break down what C9, this new bill, does. So it lowers the bar for hatred. It removes key safeguards and creates vague new crimes that can be stretched to silence dissent. So that's what Bill C9 does. It creates a new vague definition of hatred, and it replaces extreme detestation with just detestation or vilification. These are very vague terms that could be used to describe almost anything. And again, for people who are like, oh, no, 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 no.
These terms that she used, like vilification, that Michelle just said, I totally agree with her. They're vague enough to be twisted and turned into a weaponization of a concept in ways that we have never seen here in America since the Salem witch trials. And I'm being very serious about that comparison. What Michelle is saying here is right on the money. First of all, we got the hate crimes potential right here. Hate speech, hate crimes. When you commit a crime, if they say, well, it's a hate crime, then they tack additional sentencing on. Okay, well, I'm thinking, well, you're already prosecuting the crime, and the addition of a hate crime makes it a subjective judgment and as opposed to actual guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, we do have to remember, as a disclaimer, Canada does not have a constitution, and Canadians, this is where you really messed up because now you get someone from the Bank of London running your country, and that's what's happening. And you may not realize that's what's going on here, but this is why economically provinces like Alberta can't survive without leaving. Seriously. And it's because they're being exploited for their resources by Mark Carney, Bank of London, as part of the crown, which Canada's in, and the proceeds go back to the City of London. Oh, I didn't say the UK, did I? There's a distinction. And this is who Trump is fighting against. And the hate crime baseline that we're putting in there with the accompanying hate speech I believe was set into place by Satan himself, Satan inspired, designed to use as a vehicle to go after Christianity. And we're beginning to see that strategy at work. And I said the same thing about a decade ago. I said, I'm worried about how they designate hate speech now, because you can go along with your religious tenets and say, we tell our people not to do X, Y, or Z, but X, Y, or Z becomes a protected activity, a protected group, a protected whatever. And now you're guilty of the hate aspect. And this puts your religious liberties in jeopardy. And in our country, it runs contrary to one of the five tenets of the First Amendment, which is freedom of religion. But that is going to soon be under attack, trust me. Because what starts in the UK, remember the mass surveillance? And we just, whoa, why do they have all those cameras over there? Well, what do we have here now? Right? And now it's spread to Canada, and it's coming, as Matthew and I talked about in our interview, it's coming here to America. Let's hear more of what Michelle has to say.
No, that's not the case. That's exactly what's in the bill. The second thing that it does is it removes the Attorney General's consent so that police can charge you directly with no higher level filter. And it opens the door, frankly, and my concern is that it opens the door for politically motivated arrests.
Yeah, this is Gestapo stuff right here. And by Gestapo, I'm not making a pejorative insult here. What I'm talking about is you don't have to have under this bill the prosecutor's permission out of the DA's office that the cops should go and do this. The crime becomes automatically prosecuted because the police say so. This gives mayors and city managers and county commissioners enormous power.
It, um, it does a few other things, but these are key elements on why conservatives have been opposing this bill. And this morning, what they've done is they've announced that the one or two safeguards that were in here, they want to remove them so that it'll be easier to criminalize religious thought. Now, in committee on this bill already, we've seen the Liberals talk about criminalizing certain types or muse about criminalizing certain types of religious thought. So this isn't this isn't something that's esoteric. They've already thought about this, and I'm going to get more on like proof on why this is a big problem in a second. But here's the thing, guys: there's already existing laws that that deal with hate speech in Canada, and they're not being enforced. We know that we have a massive problem with anti-Semitism in Canada, but the government already has tools that they can use to prosecute these types of issues, and they're not. So, for example, the criminal code under section 319.1, it's already an offense to publicly incite hatred. 319.2, to promote hatred. 319.7 makes it clear that there are certain gestures and signs can promote hatred as well. But the government and activist courts have not, or police have chosen not to actually enforce these. So we already have these laws on the books. And the government, you've all watched the government sit idly by while police refuse to enforce certain types of laws in situations where, frankly, Jewish Canadians are being targeted, right? So these laws are already on the books, and the government is refusing to enforce them. But now they've got this new bill where they're saying that they will make an amendment so that there is no exceptions for religious belief, essentially. So that's a huge problem. What else is the problem, guys? Well, we know that activist courts and police that are not enforcing existing laws are problematic. Where has the, my leader, the conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, we've been talking about how the government has refused to do anything or even acknowledged that church burnings are a problem, right? This article is just from last month. The article is 3 charged of burning near century-old church in central Alberta. Where is the inquiry on this? Why aren't existing laws being used to prevent this from happening? I think about the fact.
She makes a point here that I want to go back into our shameful history, and this part of our history is shameful. When Black people were trying to assert some kind of political participation So they would have a measured say over their how they live their lives, which is the inherent right of every person, not just Americans, but every person. And a lot of this activity was centered in Black churches. Well, what did we go through during the desegregation era? The burning of Black churches. This is the practice, people. This is the practice. Now, this was directed at Black people solely. But if you look at what she's talking about in Canada, extrapolate what she is saying here, they're ignoring church burnings. In other words, they're fine with it. It's passive approval. And when does it become open season on Christians and Christian facilities to where our government might one day join into this attitude of Mark Carney's government and say, that's just fine with us. Burn them all down. I mean, I would hope that as an American, you took enough American history to realize that what happened during the desegregation and the attempt at integration activities of the 1950s, starting with Martin Luther King and continuing the 60s and 70s, and some people argue still somewhat present today. I mean, last time I remember a church being burned down for racially motivated purposes was, I think, over a decade ago, and I might be in error on that, but it's not something that has totally left the American genre. And we need to be mindful of this kind of an abuse, that it could be applied generally to the entire faith, regardless of race. That's the point I'm making. And that's the point she's getting to, I think, in a more indirect manner. I think I said it a little more forcefully and more directly. I'm not measuring my words. And what I'm telling you is we are going to face this. Christian persecution across the planet, as Matthew McWhorter really revealed on my show, is really high. Now we're looking at our neighbor to the north that we share a lot in common with. You know, I've never really looked at Canadians as some kind of foreign adversary until Trudeau came along. Then I started saying, okay, I still love Canadians, but their government's out of control. This is an attitude that is here in this country as well. And I want to remind you of one thing. As a Christian, I can never vote for a Democrat for one reason, and this is my personal reasoning, because they took God out of the party platform. Now, it was their right to do so. They didn't break any laws in doing it. They didn't persecute anybody, but it shows you the mindset. And if that mindset exists there, then accepting in America what Michelle is afraid of is happening in Canada is completely understandable and I think to be expected.
Fact that the government went out of their way to jail pastors during the pandemic. The government has stood idly by while shouts of death to Canada have been, held in our streets over the last 2 years. And frankly, even when you look at the government not enforcing laws that are already on the books to keep people safe, I mean, we could go to anywhere. We could go to in any direction. You can look at how they have a catch and release system for people with serious crime. How it looks like they're going to vote against my bill to stop courts from giving non-citizens who've been convicted of serious crimes leniency in order so that they can avoid deportation. And now they want us to believe that somehow this new thought crime bill won't be used against law-abiding Canadians. Of course not. This is another liberal attempt to control speech, and now they're going into freedom of religion. And regardless of how you vote, this should be a huge concern for you. It should be a concern for every Canadian of every faith. The ability to worship without persecution from the government at the very least is a foundational principle of Canadian national identity and Canadian law. This is something that the government shouldn't be eroding. And here we've got liberal deal with bloc means hate speech laws will lose exemption for sincerely held religious belief. This is what.
So your religion can never be an excuse to violate the status quo of accepted thinking. That's effectively what she's saying. and that the removal of the guardrails that did prevent that before in Canada, these Canadian Christians are exposed to terrible abuse. I totally agree with her analysis. She's exactly 100% correct. But lean in, Christians of America, or any of you who may not be a Christian, but you say, I'm concerned because first they came for the Christians, then you get the idea. So lean into this point right here. Canada is showing you what's coming. You can see that from what she said about catch and release policies, immigration policies. This is international think tank stuff. It wasn't just to America. This happened all through Europe. You hear evidence of it now in Canada. And the next step is to go after our religion. And during the shutdowns, it was rules for thee, but not for me. I mean, Gavin Newsom could eat at his favorite French restaurant with his friends, but we couldn't even hold Christian services in drive-in movie theaters where the only people that would be exposed to each other would be people from their own family that they're already exposed to anyway. Do you remember those? Yeah, do you remember that? Pastor arrested people, issued citations. So you say, it can't happen here. Oh, I would submit to you, it already has happened here. How bad will it get? And to Michelle, I would say this to you respectfully, okay? Your days of controlling your country are over because you have no constitutional protections, Michelle. You need to join the movement that's growing by leaps and bounds in Canada for the majority of the provinces, at least in the western half, to leave Canada and come to a nation where at least we have a fighting chance because we have First Amendment protections. She's talking about tradition. Tradition doesn't mean jack squat in a court of law, especially a Canadian court of law. It does mean a lot in America because we have not just tradition, we have constitution and past practice, legally speaking. We have case law. So I would say, Michelle, it's not perfect on our side of the border, but you have a hell of a lot better chance of maintaining your religious freedom here as an American than you do as a Canadian. And I know this might make her angry. I don't know, but I know it'll make some Canadians angry. And listen, I don't want to make you angry. Keep your traditions, keep your pride in being a Canadian, but you can be a Canadian American and have your standard of living and your lifestyle preserved at the same time. But ladies and gentlemen, we need to guard against this. And I haven't decided what our course of action should be, if any, against the 1,040 pastors that went to Israel. If it was just like, hey, kumbaya, let's love and respect each other, realize Christians, our religion's the first half of your religion, it's foundational. I have no problem with that because it's historically true. It's factually accurate. But when it gets into, okay, you need to put our nation over your nation, I draw the line, and that pastor should no longer have the flock because they are an American pastor. Some people won't like what I just said. Look forward to your comments. And to our Canadian friends, about 5% of our audience, I believe, is made up of Canadians, at least our subscriber base. I look forward to your comments. And by the way, I love Canada. I wish we played hockey as well as you do, and you're catching up to us in basketball and baseball. I love Canada. I truly do. I've always respected Canadians. But you have the wrong government with no protection. And under the existing status quo of how you choose your leaders, you have no chance of changing it. None. Zero. I'm Dave Hodges. This is the Common Sense Show.
We're dealing with in Ottawa, folks. You have to share this video. Please click on the
We just did, Michelle, and you're welcome. We'll see you back here next time, everybody. And God bless Michelle for her act. Seriously.